I'm Tobias from Australia, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a joke-free zone.
This may come as a surprise to those of you who've watched my channel for a long time, but I have to announce I'm giving up drinking gamer sops for good. Now, I know what you're thinking. Are you crazy, Thorin? You have always told us that it's sugar-free. It doesn't have that horrible, like, spike and then crash like a lot of other NG formulas. It's got the nice smooth rise to the top where it plateaus, then tapers off gently. It doesn't taste all chemically. It has a nice nuanced, balanced flavour set to it. Obviously, you can fit loads of doses within a small amount. That, like, cylindrical tubs, 100 doses. You can get servings of 40 in the smaller tub. You can obviously get 10% off with my code Thorin, Thorin at GameSops.gg. You'd think, why would you give it up? I didn't say I was giving up gamer subs. I said I'm giving up drinking gamer subs for good. From now on, I'm exclusively drinking it for the purposes of evil. GameSops.gg. Right. So, Karrigan, over his career, has unsurprisingly had like a career narrative that has become solidified. He's played many years, including before CSGO. But in CSGO, as an in-game leader, he has this reputation, quite frankly, until 2022, of he's a choker, he doesn't win the big ones, he wins the smaller ones, he loses finals. Obviously, he was haunted for many years by the infamous Notorious FaZe versus Cloud9 Boston Major Final. Also, quite frankly, as well as losing finals and choking, he was quite famous, I would say, for losing best of 5 finals, especially with the other era of FaZe when he had Olaf and Nico and Guardian and Rain. And what's so interesting is in the last year or so, he's completely turned that narrative around. And in fact, as you'll find out in this video, the narrative didn't quite work anyway, because actually early in his career, he had a lot of success in best of fives. It's just, unsurprisingly, very memorable ones stick in time and really make an impression on you. And quite frankly, yeah, there was this period of time where a lot of people got him when it was in BO5s. So let's go and actually jump in and have a look at some of these best of five series, because I'll give you the stats at the outset. In his career, I looked this up. Obviously, I might have like missed one here or there, but I'm pretty sure when I looked through, I got it all right. Karrigan has played, by my count, in CSGO, 19 LAN best of 5 series, and he has won 12 of the 19, so he's won 63.16%. In 2015, he went 3-2. In 2017, he went 1-4. You can see that's where the rep started. In 2018, he went 2-1. In 2019, he won 1. In 2020, he won 1. In 2022, last year, he won 3. And in 2023, so far, he has won 1, which is obviously Pro League. So amazingly, he's actually now, by the way, on an 8 best of 5 LAN winning streak of series he's won. And at one point in his career, after that notorious one where Flusher and Fnatic got him in the Katowice final in 2018, that he was 4-7 after that, but he's won the last 8, and hence now he's 12-7. So you can see he's completely turned this narrative around. So as we say, the first one that he had in his career was in 2015. By the way, 2015 was the first year we got these LAN best of 5s, especially because people like PGL and especially ESL started to implement them in some of their events. So you had this tournament here. This was the PGL kickoff. Now, this is confusing because later they had a season 1, but they did a kickoff season. And this was the one where TSM first broke out and started winning events and shocking everyone, and Karrigan hadn't been in the team very long. And you can see in the final, they played Fnatic, the best team of the era, the team that would go on to had won the major before and would win the next major as well. Let me think. Yeah, they won Cologne as well. So they played in the final. Now, to be fair, this was one of the weird ones where, because he did double elim, instead of making it just a normal best of 5 final, actually TSM got a map advantage. So they actually only had to win 2-1 in a best of 5 to win this first one against Flusher and Olaf Meister and Crimson's Fnatic. So then after that, you go to Fragbite Masters Season 4. This was a tournament, if you remember, where you played online until 4 teams were left. Then you went to LAN in Stockholm and you played out there. Now, again, they're playing against Fnatic in the final. Again, they win the tournament, and again, they beat Fnatic. This time, though, it was actually a real best of 5, and he had to win 3-1. So far, by the way, Karrigan's won the first 2 of these best of 5 of his career. So then you go to, this is one where it's debatable if we should count this or not, because it's the Fragbite Masters Champions Showdown. What they did was they took the last 2 seasons champions. So season 3 back in 2014 was won by Fnatic over LDLC, if you remember. And then obviously in 2015, I just showed you, the TSM squad beat Fnatic to win season 4 Fragbite Masters. So they had a showdown exhibition series where it wasn't even a true best of 5. You just played 5 different maps. And I think you got prize money based on overall winning and then also I think maybe something like, I think you won prize money. Yeah, it says here, based on which map you won as well. And in this, actually, Fnatic beat them convincingly. They won 4 maps to 1. It was overall actually quite a shocking performance, but it showed Fnatic was back on top again, even though TSM was the team that notoriously was able to beat them oftentimes. And then that was a loss, obviously. Now, should I count that? It wasn't really a tournament, something. Yeah, whatever, but we're counting them all for now. So he's 2-1 after that. Then they had the ESL, ESEA Pro League Invitational in Dubai. This was the one where, believe it or not, they actually were going to hold it outdoors in like the desert sun and had to like change the whole event and do it at night and with a different location. It was so stupid, the idea. It was going to be an open air land, basically. At this tournament, you might remember, TSM famously played an epic best of 5 against Virtus.pro that went all the way to the last map and then 16-14 on the last map. And you can see this was a heavyweight box. This was some like Ali versus Foreman level shit, or Joe Frazier. So this was some amazing Counter-Strike, and obviously people vividly remember it, but sadly that was when TSM used to choke and they lost this one, so now they were 2-2. And then the last one for that year was the first season, like I say, after the kickoff season of PGL, where TSM won the event, they won the LAN, and in the final they played against Virtus.pro. Again, there was a 1-map upper bracket one, so this time it was just a 2-0, but this was the one you might remember where Dupree was winning all the clutches, and after this event I said Device was the best player in the world and had overtaken all of Meister. So they win that one. So actually at the end of 2015, Karrigan is up 3-2 in best of 5 series, and he's won a whole bunch of these events. People don't forget, they won 5 events in 2015. So then you come to 2017, because in 2016, obviously Astralis wasn't as good for most of the time, and then later in the year, he got replaced by Glaive and they became a top team again. Meanwhile, he went over to FaZe, built it up, but he didn't get an eco, if you remember, until 2017, and so that was the first best of 5 that we're coming back to for Karrigan, which was at Katowice in March of 2017. He'd had an eco for about a week to practice with, who'd come from Mouse Sports, and unsurprisingly, he lost to Astralis, the KRB lineup. At the time, this was the last big event they won. They were the #1 team in the world. They were the major champions. They looked like they were going to have their own mini little era, but they didn't. And in the final, it was actually a very close affair. They even won the first one, but then the rest were really close. People like Dupree and Zipnix had great performances, and then Astralis managed to win. So now it was 3-3 in terms of best of 5 finals, but the next one, not that long afterwards, about 2 months later in Sydney, we had the one where, this is not to be confused with the one later with the standing. This is the year when they play SK in the final, if you remember. FaZe versus SK. And obviously Cold Zero had that like godlike clip on Overpass. This was the one where SK beat them 3-1 and handily took care of them. Like, you look, okay, there's some close maps, but it's still SK all day long. And obviously this began the whole thing where SK were just inside the heads of Karrigan and FaZe in particular. So you can see that why they started to bleed series after this. So then you come, but you have first ESL New York, where it's the second event, remember? They'd had Malmo, they'd blown, where he's just gotten Guardian or Orfmeister into FaZe. And in the final, they play Team Liquid, who'd been really good form. They'd beaten SK, the #1 team in the world, in the semis. They'd also beaten them in the semis of ESG Mykonos just before this event. So they were actually in very good form. Problem is, this was the unbeatable FaZe clan that didn't lose a map at this tournament, was winning every pistol. 3 players were just fragging out of the universe. Nico had one of the highest ratings ever on LAN. And in the final, same story. Aside from Overpass, that was close. This was a 3-0, and it was brutal, if you don't remember how this one went. So at this point in time, he's at 4-4 in best of 5. But the problem is, we all know this is when a lot of the FaZe disasters come. So IEM Auckland, this is, by the way, the tournament that made Rez's career and established that idea that he's a star player and even a superstar and the next Swedish star and all that jazz, and hence why he's the only player still around in NIP now. Because this is the one where he went absolutely mental. They beat SK in the semis, and in the final, that's right, in a best of 5, they beat Karrigan's FaZe clan 3-2. And sadly, again, it's always the scenario of like, oh, heartbreak, 5th map, when Karrigan gets in these scenarios. Then you had ESL Pro League, which you might remember was another SK loss, even though this was actually a much closer series. Like, obviously, this could have gone to a 5th map. That was the one with, like, the epic rounds. Obviously, early on, it was looking interesting. But again, SK gets the better of them. SK wins. At the end of 2017, Karrigan's on a 4-6 record in best of 5s. So we go to 2018. Now, this is the kind of Vitze where, obviously, cheeky boy Flosher and Fnatic managed to absolutely break the hearts of Karrigan and Olofmeister. If you remember, that was one where Olofmeister got like 4-3, where he was on the inside like 3 train, and he was looking like that. And then Flusher, because he was on 4-3, he was able to just sneak past him, get a kill, and like get an ace or something, and basically carried the whole final. Otherwise, FaZe would have won. It would have been another notch for the Grand Slam. Maybe they would have been the first team to win the Grand Slam. But instead, Nope, it was actually Fnatic who shocked the world, won this. They also won WESG, and then they did that weird thing where they kicked Golden a little bit afterwards, even though they eventually brought him back, obviously. So this is already was spelling, it's pretty much the end for FaZe Clan. They've lost the major against the Cloud9 team. Now they've lost Katowice, but then they had that period where Olofmeister just had to leave the game for whatever reason. We never actually found the official reason, so they used stand-ins. They went IM Sydney, and they took Exist, the old Exist from NIP, as a stand-in. And they'd already actually used him as a stand-in also at like DreamHack Marseille just before. People forget this, where they hadn't done that well. Whereas Astralis had smashed everyone and looked epic. And then in the final here, people forget this. This is Prime Astralis. Remember, I showed you earlier, Karrigan was in Best of 5 LAN Series beating Prime Fnatic. Now he's beating Prime Astralis, by the way. This is the team that goes on to be the greatest lineup of all time. And this is famously the epically close 3-0, but one of the closest 3-0, one of the closest series you'll ever see played. It was incredible. Go check out how people like Guardian played in this one. So he managed to win that one. Then he had a similar scenario, standing again. Now listen, this event didn't have Astralis. It didn't have, who else would there be? Na'Vi. There's a whole bunch of top teams skipped this one. And obviously Mouse themselves, who played in the final against FaZe, had their own stand-in. They had nothing instead of Oscar. Oscar's one of the best players in the world at this point in time, and the AWPer. Meanwhile, FaZe themselves have a stand-in, but instead of Exist now it's Kroman, that Norwegian guy that no one ever heard of since and no one had heard of before. And they managed to win the final. A best of 5, goes all the way to the 5th map. This time it's FaZe that's winning it. So, okay. We're getting back in a shape now. Now he's only 6 and 7. He's already played a couple of these with stand-ins and he's winning them, by the way. So at the end of 2018, he'd actually gone 2 and 1. So he sort of started to rectify things. And already, by the way, as I said before, it was that Katowice loss that sparked the winning streak. So those 2 we've had there were stand-ins, Sydney and Belo Horizonte. Those are one with stand-ins. Then you go to 2019. Obviously, it's only at the end of 2019 he plays the best of 5 again because he was in Mouse, where they had all those problems initially. And then he'd been in Envy at the beginning of that year, and then he'd gotten the team good, and at the end of the year they made their run, and at the Pro League finals they'd beaten Astralis in that epic semi. In the final they played against Fnatic, same Fnatic by the way, essentially, that he'd lost against earlier in the year in this Katowice, the previous year, sorry, and basically with a totally different lineup in his Mouse team. Obviously he got the 3-0. This was the big one that he won at the end of the year that again reignited the legend of Karrigan, right? This was another 3-0 in the final. Very impressive performance. It's vaguely close, like the first halves are obviously good for Fnatic sometimes, but at the end of the day, it just closes about 3-0 and the win streak continues on. Then you go, people forget this event, in early 2020, just before Blast, there was the Ice Challenge LAN in London, but it actually had a whole bunch of top teams there. And obviously, this thing, like if people don't remember, like Godsent at the time was doing pretty decently. Obviously, Ents was a joke. Mad Lions was just getting going. OG hadn't been around as a lineup very long. Mouse was like the top team at the time. VP was whatever. Like this team was the one that was a vanguard before, but they weren't that great. Heroic was nowhere near a top team yet. This was, I mean, they hadn't gone online yet. And Na'Vi, obviously, after this, won Katowice in epic fashion and became really good. But no one really knew where they were at this point in time. It was Blast, obviously, after this that they reinvented themselves. So in the final, Mouse played against Na'Vi. This was one of the events they won as well in that little streak of whatever it was, 5 finals. And they beat Na'Vi 3-1. By the way, this is Na'Vi with Simple, Electronic, Flamey, Boomich. It didn't have Bit yet. That's the key thing to note, but still some extremely good players. And obviously, the GOAT, like fucking Simple's in this team, and he won that LAN final as well. So there's another one for him in 2020. Now, obviously, after that, we went online and Mouse sucked, and eventually Karrigan left and went to FaZe the next year in 2021. 2021, he didn't have any LAN finals that were best of 5s because there barely were any LAN finals, and his team wasn't good enough to be in them. This was Olofmeister instead of Rops. Then they got Rops in instead of Olofmeister for 2022, and obviously the good times keep rolling, right? They make the Katowice final, where they play against the Alexi B, Monacy, Nico G2, where they win 3-0. Again, really close series. Reminds me of IM Sydney. Really good series, by the way. There's a lot of great play in it, but very clutch by FaZe. They managed to come through and win. Then they went straight to ESL Pro League Season 15, and the same Ents that had beaten them in the group stage, by the way, in the best of 3, plays them in the final, but they won 3-1. They did this one where they were cheeky and left Vertigo, and obviously it gets played, but then actually FaZe manages to win it to try and imply they can play Vertigo. They never really tried this card again, and they win against the Snappy-led Ents, and this was when they still had Spinks and Hades, if people remember, who obviously neither of them play in the team anymore. And yeah, this was another big win. Then you go to IM Cologne. By the way, this might be the best series of Counter-Strike ever played. This was where the Na'Vi team with Sumdai Young, who'd obviously won Blast previously, played against FaZe, and this was the last title they won in the 2022. And this obviously was a key notch on the Grand Slam. And It was a 3-2, and it was an incredibly close series. It was really epic. This was a really special series. And by the way, this is the Na'Vi show, not with Boomich, where the core, you still have simple bit electronic. This is the core with Bade Cutcham that won the major the previous year. Another of the all-time great cores that is losing in a best-of-5 LAN final to Karrigan. And then, of course, we come to the last one, the most recent one, ESL Pro League Season 17. And, of course, in the final, they played Cloud9, kind of an ominous opponent, because without a big crowd, obviously Cloud9 tend to perform a bit better. Then again, maybe in pressure matches they don't. But obviously, famously, it'd been a really back and forth matchup between these two teams through the last year or so. And at this point in time, a lot of people wondered maybe Cloud9's the one that can beat them and deny them, but they didn't. FaZe won. They won the Grand Slam 3-1. They could actually, by the way, have won 3-0, but there was a key turnaround from Cloud9, and obviously some of the Cloud9 players did frag out at times, like Axile. So yeah, the last 8 series of his career, Karrigan won. Best of 5. That is very impressive as a streak, by the way. And like I say, you look at some of the teams he's beating, these are some of the best teams and players to ever play Counter-Strike. So it just shows how interesting it is, how you have a narrative that's set and might even be accurate at the time relative to who you are, who you're playing, how the game's going, the dynamics. But it can change, especially when we're talking about the greats of all time. They can go to levels that the rest of us can't, that normal, good, and even very good players can't. They can change their careers by force of will, by applying their skill, by understanding the game, by evolving what they're doing, by learning from their mistakes. So I think this is one of the all-time great turnarounds. The Beatles said they get by with a little help from their friends, but I get by with a little help from my Patreon community. And this video was kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, BotPounder420, Thooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Tosh, and a special thanks always goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers to find out who are the upcoming guests? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy but intense esports discussions I have with my donators, or maybe you want to suggest a guest or a topic that I could cover. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below there is a Patreon link.